I've been getting countless requests for school lockdown stories, and honestly, I wasn't sure about covering them. But these 3 submissions were so intense, so genuinely terrifying that I couldn't ignore them. So settle in, because these are some of the most unsettling stories I've ever shared. What you're about to hear happened to real students, in real schools, during real lockdowns. These aren't Hollywood dramatizations or urban legends. These are the experiences of people who lived through moments when their safe spaces became anything but safe. The names have been changed for privacy, but everything else is exactly as it happened. This story comes from Jessica, who was a junior in high school when this happened 3 years ago in a small town in Ohio. It was a Tuesday morning, second period, and I was in my AP history class when the announcement came over the intercom. At first, we didn't hear it clearly because Mr. Peterson was writing something on the whiteboard and the marker was squeaking. But then he stopped mid-sentence, and we all heard the principal's voice, shaky and urgent. All teachers and students, we are now in lockdown. This is not a drill. Please follow all lockdown procedures immediately. The room went dead silent. Mr. Peterson's face went white, and he immediately rushed to lock the classroom door and turn off the lights. We all knew the drill. We'd practiced it dozens of times. Move away from windows, stay quiet, and wait for the all clear. There were about 25 of us in the class, and we huddled together in the corner farthest from the door and windows. Some of the girls were already crying softly. Everyone was texting their parents, trying to keep their phones on silent. Mr. Peterson was trying to stay calm, but I could see his hands shaking as he pulled down the window blinds. He kept checking the door lock over and over again, like he wasn't sure it would hold. We sat there for what felt like hours, but was probably only about 10 minutes when we heard footsteps in the hallway. Slow, deliberate footsteps, like someone was checking each classroom door. The footsteps stopped right outside our door. Then we heard the handle turn. Mr. Peterson had locked it, but whoever was outside started pushing on the door, testing it. The door rattled slightly in its frame. We all held our breath, trying not to make any sound. Then we heard a voice. A man's voice, muffled by the door, but clear enough to understand. "I know you're in there. Open the door." It wasn't a teacher's voice. It wasn't a police officer's voice. It was someone else, someone who shouldn't have been in our school. Mr. Peterson gestured frantically for us to stay quiet and move further back. Some students were hyperventilating now, trying to control their breathing. My friend Sarah was gripping my arm so tight it left bruises. The voice came again, louder this time. "I said open the door. I can hear you breathing." That's when Mr. Peterson did something that probably saved our lives. Instead of staying quiet, he called out in a shaky voice, "This is an empty classroom. There's nobody in here." There was silence for a moment. Then the man outside laughed. It was a cold, calculating laugh that made my skin crawl. "Empty classroom, huh? Then why is your car in the parking lot, Mr. Peterson?" "Blue Honda Civic, license plate ending in 847. My blood turned to ice. This person knew Mr. Peterson, knew his car, had been watching him planning this. The door handle rattled again, more violently this time. Then we heard something that made everyone in the room start crying, the sound of keys jingling. "Don't worry, Mr. Peterson. I've got the master key. I used to work here, remember?" That's when I realized who it was. Mr. Crawford, the maintenance worker who'd been fired earlier that year for inappropriate behavior toward female students. He'd been escorted off campus by security, and there had been rumors about why he was really let go. But here he was, back in the building, with keys, looking for specific people. The key slid into the lock, and we heard it turn. Mr. Peterson pressed himself against the door, trying to hold it shut, but Crawford was pushing from the other side. 25 students watched in terror as our teacher fought to keep a predator out of our classroom. "Everyone get to the supply closet," Mr. Peterson whispered urgently. "Lock yourselves in, now." We scrambled toward the back of the room where there was a small supply closet. It was barely big enough for half of us, but we crammed in anyway, pulling the door shut behind us. Through the thin closet door, we could hear the classroom door finally give way. Heavy footsteps entered the room. "Where did they go, Mr. Peterson?" Crawford's voice was closer now, inside our classroom. "I saw 25 students on the attendance sheet this morning. Where are my 25 students?" "They're not here," Mr. Peterson said, but his voice was trembling. "They evacuated when the lockdown started." "Liar." We heard the sound of desks being overturned, chairs being thrown. Crawford was searching the room methodically, and we knew it was only a matter of time before he found the supply closet. That's when we heard the most beautiful sound in the world, police sirens getting closer. Crawford must have heard them too, because the classroom went quiet. Then we heard running footsteps, getting fainter as he fled down the hallway. The police found us in the supply closet 20 minutes later. Crawford had escaped through a window in another classroom, but they caught him in the parking lot, trying to get to his car. It turned out he'd been planning this for months. He had detailed maps of the school, class schedules, and a list of specific students he wanted to visit. My name was on that list, along with 4 other girls from my class. The whole thing lasted less than an hour, but it felt like a lifetime. We were all given counseling, and the school changed all their locks and security procedures. But I still can't sit in a classroom without knowing exactly where all the exits are. What haunts me most is that Crawford knew exactly which classroom to come to. He had our schedules memorized. He knew Mr. Peterson's car, his voice, probably everything about our daily routines. We weren't random victims. We were targets, and if it wasn't for Mr. Peterson's quick thinking and the police response time, I don't think all of us would have made it home that day. I still have nightmares about that voice outside the door, asking for his 25 students, like we belonged to him. This story comes from Marcus, who was a sophomore when this happened at his high school in Pennsylvania 2 years ago. I'll never forget that Thursday morning, because everything about it felt wrong from the start. Our regular English teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, was out sick, and we had a substitute. But this substitute was different. His name was Mr. Kellerman, according to what he wrote on the board, but something about him immediately put everyone on edge. He was probably in his 40s average height, but there was something about the way he looked at us that made my skin crawl. He didn't have any lesson plans. Instead, he spent the first 20 minutes of class asking us personal questions. Not normal getting to know you questions, but weird stuff like who lives farthest from school? And does anyone walk home alone? And what time do your parents usually get home from work? My friend Tyler and I exchanged looks. This wasn't normal substitute teacher behavior. Then Kellerman started asking about our lockdown procedures. So if there was an emergency, he said, leaning against his desk, "What exactly would you kids do?" Walk me through it, step by step. Some students started explaining the procedure. Lock the door, turn off lights, hide in the corner away from windows. Kellerman was taking notes. Actual notes about our safety procedures. And how did the police get in? He asked. Do teachers have a way to communicate with the office during a lockdown? That's when I knew something was seriously wrong. No legitimate substitute would need this information. I was about to raise my hand to ask to go to the bathroom. Really, I wanted to go to the office and report this when the lockdown alarm started blaring. The timing was too perfect, too convenient. Kellerman immediately went to the door, but instead of locking it like he was supposed to, he opened it and stuck his head out into the hallway. He was looking both ways, like he was checking for something. Mr. Kellerman called out Ashley, one of the students. "You're supposed to lock the door and turn off the lights." He turned back to us with this strange smile. "Oh, I know exactly what I'm supposed to do." But he didn't lock the door. Instead, he pulled his phone out and started typing something. Then he walked over to the windows and opened the blinds wider, making us more visible from outside. "Everyone stay right where you are," he said. "Don't hide. Don't move. Just stay in your seats." That's when Tyler stood up. "This isn't right. You're supposed to follow lockdown protocol." Kellerman's expression changed instantly. The fake friendly demeanor dropped, and his voice became cold and threatening. "Sit down, Tyler, now." The fact that he knew Tyler's name was terrifying. We hadn't been wearing name tags, and this was supposed to be his first day meeting us. "How do you know my name?" Tyler asked, backing toward the classroom door. "I know all your names," Kellerman said, pulling a folded piece of paper from his pocket. "Tyler Morrison, Ashley Chun, Marcus Williams, Jennifer Park. He started reading through our entire class roster, including students who weren't even there that day. That's when we realized this wasn't a real substitute teacher. "Everyone stay calm," I said, trying to take control of the situation. "We need to follow proper lockdown procedure." I moved toward the light switch, but Kellerman blocked my path. "The lights stay on," he said firmly, "and the door stays open. We're expecting visitors during a lockdown." My blood went cold. Jennifer started crying. "I want to call my mom." "No phones," Kellerman snapped, and that's when I saw that he had something in his hand. It looked like a small radio or walkie-talkie. He spoke into it quietly. "Northeast classroom, second floor. All targets are present." Targets. He called us targets. That's when Tyler made a run for the door. Kellerman tried to grab him, but Tyler was faster. He made it out into the hallway and started screaming for help. The rest of us didn't know what to do. Half the class was crying, and Kellerman was getting more agitated by the second. He kept checking his watch and looking out the window. "He was supposed to be here by now," he muttered to himself. Then we heard shouting from somewhere else in the building. Real shouting, not practice drill shouting. Someone was calling for backup, and there were footsteps running in the hallways. Kellerman's radio crackled, and we heard a voice say, "Abort! Police are here. Get out now." That's when Kellerman did something that still gives me nightmares. He looked at all of us and said, "This was supposed to be easy. You kids were supposed to make this easy." Then he grabbed his bag and ran out of the classroom, leaving us alone and terrified. It turned out that Tyler's escape had triggered a real emergency response. When he ran screaming down the hallway, a real teacher found him and immediately called 911. The police arrested Kellerman in the parking lot. They also arrested another man who was trying to enter the building through a side entrance. The visitor Kellerman had been waiting for. During the investigation, we learned that Kellerman wasn't a substitute teacher at all. He was a convicted felon who had somehow gotten access to the school's substitute database. He'd been planning this for weeks, studying our schedules, learning our names, figuring out which classroom would have the most students during second period. The scariest part was finding out what they planned to do with us. I won't go into details, but it involved a van parked behind the school and a cabin in the woods about 2 hours away. If Tyler hadn't run when he did, if the real lockdown procedures had been followed with Kellerman in charge of our classroom, things would have ended very differently. The school completely overhauled their substitute teacher screening process after this incident. They also changed the lockdown procedures so that individual teachers can't override the safety protocols. But I still get paranoid whenever we have a substitute teacher. I watch them carefully, listen to their questions, pay attention to how they handle emergencies, because I learned that the most dangerous person in the school might not be an intruder breaking in from outside. Sometimes they're already inside, wearing a name tag and carrying a lesson plan. waiting for the perfect moment to turn a safety drill into something much worse. Our final story comes from David, who was a senior at a large high school in Texas when this incident happened just last year. It was a Friday afternoon, last period of the day, and everyone was ready for the weekend. I was in my chemistry class with about 30 other students when the lockdown announcement came over the PA system. But this announcement was different from the usual drills. Instead of the principal's calm voice explaining the lockdown procedure, it was our security guard, Mr. Williams, and he sounded panicked. All students and faculty, we have an active threat in the building. This is not a drill. Lockdown procedures are now in effect. Do not leave your classrooms under any circumstances. Our chemistry teacher, Ms. Davis, immediately locked the door and turned off the lights. We all moved to our designated safe area behind the lab tables, away from the door and windows. But then something strange happened. Ms. Davis got a phone call on her cell phone. "Hello?" She whispered into the phone. Then her face went pale. "What do you mean there's no lockdown?" "But we just heard the announcement, ... double quotes." She hung up and looked at all of us with confusion. That was my husband. He's a teacher in the elementary school next door. He says they haven't received any lockdown notifications, and there's no police activity outside. That's when we started to hear things that didn't make sense. First, we heard the announcement again, but this time we were listening more carefully. Mr. Williams' voice sounded wrong. It was too clear, too perfect, like it was a recording rather than a live announcement. Then we heard footsteps in the hallway, but they weren't the heavy boots of police officers or the urgent steps of administrators. They were slow, casual footsteps, like someone was taking a leisurely stroll. "Stay down," Miss Davis whispered, but I could tell she was as confused as we were. The footsteps stopped outside our door, and we heard the handle turn. But the door was locked, so whoever was out there couldn't get in. Then we heard a voice. A young voice, maybe another student. "Hey, is anyone in there? The lockdown's fake? You can come out." None of us moved. We'd been trained never to unlock the door during a lockdown, no matter what anyone said from the outside. "Seriously," the voice continued, "I'm a student here. Jake Morrison from Mr. Peterson's class. The whole thing is fake. Some kid hacked the PA system as a prank." A few students looked like they wanted to get up, but Ms. Davis shook her head firmly. "We don't move until we get official word from administration," she whispered. The voice outside got more insistent. "Come on, guys. I can see your feet under the door. Everyone else has already come out. You're the only class still hiding." That's when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Our chemistry classroom had solid doors with no gap at the bottom. There was no way anyone could see our feet under the door. I caught Ms. Davis's eye and pointed to the door. She saw what I was seeing and nodded grimly. Whoever was outside was lying. "Jake Morrison," Ms. Davis called out softly. "What's your student ID number?" There was a pause. Then the voice said, "Why would you need my student ID? Just open the door." "Every student knows their ID number," Ms. Davis replied. "If you're really a student here, you'll know yours." Another pause, longer this time. "Look, lady, just open the door. The lockdown is over." But we all heard it now. The voice had changed slightly. It was trying to sound young, but there was something artificial about it, like an adult trying to imitate a teenager's voice. That's when we heard the real security guard's voice over the intercom. "Attention all students and faculty. We have an intruder in the building who has been impersonating school personnel and students. The lockdown is real and ongoing. Do not open your doors for anyone claiming to be a student or teacher. Wait for police identification." The footsteps outside our door suddenly became rapid, like someone was running away. For the next hour, we huddled in that chemistry classroom, listening to police officers searching the building. We could hear them going room by room, identifying themselves and checking on each class. When they finally got to our room, they knocked and clearly announced themselves as police officers. They gave us their badge numbers and had us verify their identities through the main office before Miss Davis unlocked the door. The officer who spoke to us explained what had happened. Someone had gained access to the school's PA system and created a fake lockdown announcement. Then they'd gone from classroom to classroom, trying to trick students and teachers into opening their doors. They'd successfully gotten into 3 classrooms before teachers and students started getting suspicious. The intruder had been using a voice modulator to sound like different people. First the security guard for the announcement, then various students to trick people into opening doors. What made it especially terrifying was how much information this person had about our school. They knew teacher names, student names, classroom locations, and even details about our lockdown procedures. The police never did catch whoever did it. They found evidence that someone had broken into the school's computer system weeks earlier and stolen databases containing student and staff information. The person had been planning this for a long time, learning our routines, our procedures, our names and faces. What still haunts me is thinking about those 3 classrooms that did open their doors. The police wouldn't tell us exactly what happened in those rooms, but they said counselors would be available for the affected students. The fact that someone could study us so carefully, learn our safety procedures so well, and then use that knowledge against us was terrifying. They turned our own lockdown drills into a weapon. Since then, our school has completely changed how they handle lockdowns. No one opens doors for anyone during a lockdown, even if they claim to be police. All communication has to go through the main office, and they've installed cameras in every hallway so they can monitor who's moving around during emergencies. But the scary part is that this person is still out there. They spent weeks or maybe months planning this attack on our school, and when it didn't work perfectly, they just disappeared. Sometimes I wonder if they moved on to another school, learned another set of procedures, studied another group of students and teachers. The idea that someone could be out there right now, watching and planning and waiting for the perfect moment to turn a safety drill into something much worse, keeps me awake at night. Because they proved that the systems designed to keep us safe can be turned against, used by someone smart enough and patient enough to learn how they work. These 3 stories show us that lockdowns, while designed to protect students, can sometimes become something far more sinister in the wrong hands. Whether it's a former employee with inside knowledge, a fake substitute teacher, or someone who studied the system from the outside, the threat isn't always what we expect. If you're a student or teacher watching this, remember that your safety procedures exist for a reason. Trust your instincts, follow the protocols, and never assume that a voice you recognize is actually who you think it is. Stay safe out there, and remember, the scariest thing about these stories isn't what happened. It's knowing that somewhere out there, people are studying schools, learning routines, and planning ways to turn our safest spaces into something else entirely. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.